Hello, everyone. How are you tonight? Excellent. We can do better than that. Come on. How you all doing? Good? All right. I'm going to warm this audience up. My name is Tim McCarthy, and I am the host and director of the A.R.T. of Human Rights. And I just want to welcome everyone here tonight as we launch our series, which is a year-long series that represents a collaboration between the American Repertory Theater and the Carr Center for Human Rights Policy at the Harvard Kennedy School. We are funded through a generous grant from Mass Humanities, so I want to give Mass Humanities a big shout out. Thank you very much for that. This series, I'll talk a little bit more about the inspiration for this series when we get going into the conversation, but I just want to explain what it is. This is a series that seeks to use the arts and the humanities to explore some of the most pressing human rights issues of our time. And the series has two major components. The first component is a series of public conversations, much like this one, with leading artists and academics and activists from across the country and throughout the world. And the other component is a series of artistic and educational partnerships with local schools and with local organizations. Just this morning, a couple of us were at Lowell High School with a group of about 200 or 300 high school students from Lowell talking about many of the issues that we're going to be talking about this evening. And so we're really very, very excited to have this really model collaboration between the A.R.T. and the Carr Center launched here at Oberon tonight that will continue on for the rest of the year. I wanted to make a few quick house announcements. The first is that we will be videotaping this, or we are currently videotaping this, so you're all complicit in that. So I apologize if you weren't warned ahead of time, but we will be videotaping this, making it available on the Carr Center YouTube channel. We are also asking everyone to silence your cell phones, just so that we don't have those kinds of interruptions during the formal proceedings here. And the other thing I wanted to say is that you can use your cell phones to tweet #ARTHumanRights. And you can also drink while you are here tonight, but do not, I know, right? There's always someone in the audience with the clapping. But please do not drunk tweet. And if you drunk tweet, please do not drunk tweet about any of us. But most of all, I just want you to sit back and enjoy the show that we have here today. I just wanted to say at the very outset of this that the musical introduction that you were listening to as you were entering the theater tonight was a four-movement piece on LGBT civil rights that was done by Omar Thomas. Omar, where are you? Raise your hand. Omar, congratulations. Which is an award-winning piece and a brilliant piece, and I hope you enjoyed it. There'll be CDs afterwards for you to purchase if you'd like. There'll also be DVDs of the documentary film Call Me Kuchu, both available at the front desk as you leave the theater this evening. So let's get to the task at hand. Tonight's program is going to be looking at bearing witness to Uganda, God, gays, and human rights. I want to introduce very briefly, in one line, my colleagues here, my friends who are up on stage with me. To my left, Matt Gould and Griffin Matthews, who are the brilliant co-creators of Witness Uganda, which had its world premiere, A.R.T. premiere last season at the A.R.T. And to my right are Malika Zuhali Worrell and John Long Jones Wambere. Malika is the producer and co-director of Call Me Kuchu, the award-winning and acclaimed documentary film. And Long Jones is an iconic LGBTI activist from Uganda, co-founder of Uganda Spectrum Initiatives. So we have a wonderful group of folks here tonight who are artists and activists and people who have a lot to say about the topics that we're going to be discussing this evening. So thank you all for being here and welcome. The first question I want to ask, and I want to ask it to the group of you, is that each of you has found your own way to make a difference in the world, as artists, as filmmakers, as musicians, as activists. And those callings have brought you to this stage together. You have different ways of doing your work, but intersecting passions and directions. And so I wanted to start out tonight by asking each of you to reflect a little bit on your journey. How did you come to your calling?
Small question. First of all, it's really great to be here in Boston and lots of familiar faces. I love this community. We Matt and I flew in from LA yesterday, and we're just so excited to be back in Cambridge. We went to Algiers and had lunch. That was like the big deal. Let's go to Algiers. And then obviously to be at Lowell High School this morning was really special for us to return there and to be with you guys. So thank you for being here. Thank you for having us again. I think that what's interesting about the journey is, for me, I think I stumbled into it. And it took me many years to make peace with stumbling into the journey. I think I'm still currently making peace with stumbling into the journey. I went to Uganda in 2005 and had never been, didn't know anything about it, and really met a group of kids that ultimately changed the course of my life. And I think that as far as the musical is concerned, you know, in 2008 when the economy collapsed and I had started this nonprofit organization and it was really suffering, and Matt was like, oh, we should write a musical about aid work. And I thought it was the worst idea that I'd ever heard. No one wants to see a musical about aid work. And he started secretly recording me, which is totally illegal, but he started secretly recording me, and he caught the first rant that I was doing about the complexity of helping. He captured it on his computer and set music to it, and that was really the start of Witness Uganda, which ended up being a one-night benefit concert in New York in a rinky-dink theater. And from there, it just kept going. And so the whole journey for me has been about accepting what it is, accepting my place inside of that journey, and realizing that there is a great responsibility inside of carrying the torch for LGBTI issues, rights, and being an African-American gay man who's also Christian or identifies as Christian. That was, you know, a steep, steep climb for me.
Yeah, just to build off of what Griffin just said, somebody once said to us, any moment in your life can become a movement. Any moment in your life can become a movement. And I think this wasn't something that we planned. We didn't plan to write a musical. We didn't plan to be activists for LGBTI rights. In fact, I said to the students at Lowell today, you know, when I first came out of the closet, my mother was like, it's fine. It's not you I'm worried about. It's everybody else I'm worried about. And I said to her, Mom, I'm not going to become the poster child for LGBT rights. And now we are
And now he's on a poster.
Now I'm on a poster and we're fighting for LGBT rights. So I'm the poster man for that. But it's about accepting the calling when it comes and choosing to do something or not do something. And we're choosing to do something because we have to.
Yeah, so I basically... Oh, sorry, there we go. So I came to start working on Call Me Kuchu previously from a journalism background. And the magazine I was working on, this was back in 2008 when the financial crisis and the media crisis hit at the same time. So the magazine I was working for shut down, so I was out of a job, and basically realized I hadn't been enjoying working as a journalist, and that writing wasn't quite the medium that worked for me, and kind of realized that I wanted to be working in film and documentary and kind of doing the same thing, but in a cinematic form. So I started researching a bunch of topics, and a friend of mine had just come back from Uganda, having worked with the activist community there, and she told me the story of Victor Mukasa, one of Long John's friends and a really amazing activist, a trans activist in Uganda, who essentially sued the Ugandan Attorney General for police harassment, essentially, a few years ago, and actually won his case in a Ugandan court. And this was back in 2007, 2008. And when I heard about that, I was just kind of blown away by this idea that in a country where homosexuality, or sodomy at least, was illegal, there was at least one trans activist, or LGBT activist, in fact, who could hold the government, essentially, and the police and the Ugandan Attorney General accountable within that country's own legal system and still win based on certain civil liberties in the Constitution. So I was kind of intrigued by that tension, and that's what led to me meeting David Kato, who is one of the activists featured in Call Me Cuckoo, and also Long Jones, who's also featured in Call Me Cuckoo. And so that all started in about 2009 when myself and my directing partner, I actually made the film with another director, Catherine Fairfax Wright, who couldn't be here this evening, but we just went out to Uganda and just started meeting and filming with the community. And then 2 years later, premiered the film. So.
Lon Jones?
Mine is a long journey, but I'll just put it in brief. In 2002, I moved from a small city, and then I went to Kampala. At that time, I had accepted myself as a gay man, but little was known about the risks of anal sex. And while in Kampala, I noticed a couple of my friends were dying, and this really moved me. So with the little idea that I had connections with the medical ground because my mom was a registered midwife, I took the task of trying to help the LGBT people, especially the gay men, with issues of health, especially STDs at that time. And then I continued to notice that people were dying, and this kept moving me. One of the directors of Spectrum Uganda decided to tell me that, John, you can join me and we can make a difference in this community. And he saw potential in me, and he encouraged me. I didn't know, because to me it was about prosperity. I wanted to make money. I was working with a travel company. I was enjoying, so I didn't know what I was doing until later, a couple of years later, I started hearing the word activist. Yeah, so to me, I don't know, and I've just been stuck there. At some time, I was like, I'm stopping this. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to risk. I don't want to get these late night calls. But when the call comes in, I just find myself jumping out of the house and running to rescue somebody. So
Let me follow up on that, actually, as a way to turn the conversation a bit. Each of you cited serendipity, right? Being in a place and being sort of in the middle of something that you didn't expect to be in the middle of, as the thing that led to your calling, led to you becoming an activist, a filmmaker, in the theater, poster child, whatever. But there are a lot of people in the world who find themselves in those situations, in situations that they didn't expect, that might surprise them, and don't step up or speak up or respond to those calls. So what is it about each of you in your own way, and I'm asking this directly of you, what is it that keeps you going back? What motivates you to step up and speak out and put yourself in a position of danger, frankly, when other folks might shy away from that and not step up or not respond to those calls?
I think when you notice that you're being oppressed and you're being there's a lot of rejection going on in the community, you want to stand out and make your stand and be that solid rock to tell people that, no, it is not what you think, but this is who I am, or this is who we are. Trying to make them understand you. Because there's a time when you just don't want to be in that cage anymore. And you just want to be who you are and live your reality. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Malika, I'll ask you the same question with a twist. What about documentary film is the choice of medium for you to respond to that call?
Yeah, well, I guess, as I was saying earlier, I was kind of working in print journalism, and I think one thing I was frustrated by was that I wasn't interested only in the news. I was kind of interested in people's gestures and their personalities and who they were, their characteristics, and I think that's something that film enables you to capture in a really special way, and theatre does also. But I think I kind of was very excited about this opportunity, especially in relation to Call Me Cuckoo specifically, but something I'm hoping to bring to all my filmmaking, this opportunity to maybe even kind of override stereotypes people might have about a community or people from a certain part of the world and so on by helping them get to know people in a way that they probably wouldn't have been able to otherwise. And so something we really focused on with Call Me Kuchu was actually not making sure that it would have an advocacy component, but just making sure that people could get to know Long Jones and David and Naomi and all the people, all the activists in this community, as well as we'd known them, because we figured that once they knew them really well, they would be behind their cause no matter what, and we didn't need to kind of add anything to that. And so I think that was something that felt very special about the film medium for me, was that we could bring people into David's house and kind of get to know him very well.
I think,
Yeah,
Tim,
go ahead.
one thing that happens is there are no scripts in Call Me Kuchu.
That's right.
There's no script in Call Me Kuchu. So this is basically a day-to-day life of people, how they live, and them doing what they do and saying what they should say without edit, without...
There was some editing.
Okay, without telling somebody, say this because that's what I want the people to hear. Yeah.
Yeah, when you're filming, you capture whatever it is that's happening and then edit and go back, and because you're trying to craft a particular kind of story and a particular kind of narrative, which you did quite brilliantly. So talk a little bit about the editing and the non-editing.
Yeah, if it had been unedited, that would have been hard to watch. But just because it would have been
Would have
hours
been very
and hours,
long, yeah.
and the crudest jokes would have been in there too. We had to take some of them out, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, also within documentary, there are there's a lot of staging that goes on in many documentaries in general for a whole range of reasons, and sometimes they're very legitimate reasons, sometimes they're because people don't have time. But certainly one thing we were determined to do, and we were determined to take time to do, and we were filming over the course of a year and a half in Uganda, and then had people filming while we couldn't be there and so on. But we were determined to do as much as possible as we could to film things as they happened in real time. And to be honest, there were times when it felt like nothing was happening, and we just had to stick around and wait, and we'd spend a week with not really filming. But yeah, I think that kind of really made a big difference. And what was awesome was that we were able to have conversations with Long Jones and Naomi and David and so on, where we explained exactly why we were doing that, and they really got it, and they really understood why we were taking this approach, which none of them had really dealt with before, because all the journalists who came in wanted to pin them down for an hour, get their interview, get some B-roll of them walking down the street or doing something that they could use to edit with and so on. Whereas we just had these long conversations where we were explaining what we thought was different about our approach. And I think after a while, David and Long Jones and Naomi really got it. And after a while, they started bringing us ideas as to what we should be filming. So there's something really special about that process and the kind of collaborative process of figuring out how to tell these stories, I think.
Perfect segue. Speaking of collaborative processes, you two are creative partners who have had a long relationship to the material that you are seeking to represent and do represent in Witness Uganda. But the theater and musical theater is a different genre than documentary film. And whereas documentary film is seeking to represent these real lives in authentic, though perhaps edited ways, your representation of the lives that you're seeking to represent is different on stage. In part because theater is just a different medium, but also because some of the characters were composites. You play the main character whose name is Griffin. How did you choose that medium and the way that you made the choices for Witness Uganda that ultimately became this work of art?
Well, as Griffin said, I said, let's write a musical about this thing. And Griffin was like, well, that's the worst idea ever. And I think, and it probably was, but I think the thing about musical theater is that it's sort of an angry art form. At least for me it is, because I think I'm a little angry. And it lends itself well to taking individual moments and exploding them into mind-bending, loud, in-your-face, emotional songs. And I think, a lot of times we mistake musical theater for being sort of light and fluffy. And the truth of the matter is that the history of musical theater is steeped in writers who were writing about war and racism and love and art and these difficult subjects that were sort of hard to contain. And I think that, when we first started writing the show, we weren't writing a show necessarily even about a gay character, but as sort of time has passed and musicals take so long, and I think that we've even as we're sort of looking towards the future and reworking parts of the show, a government has basically in Uganda gave people the go-ahead to report their neighbors, round them up, put them in jail, and kill them. And I think that that's the sort of subject matter that lends itself really well to an art form that forces people to cry out in agony, pain, and anger. And, I always say that in Africa, in Uganda, we were at a funeral last year. A woman had died of AIDS and left behind 2 children. And the women came into the room to mourn for their friend, and the women stood around their friend and they cried out, "Ah!" When they express pain or mourning, they cry out. In this country, we don't cry out. We hold it together. We're brave. And so I think that we need an art form that allows us to cry out. The way that those women cry out in pain is the same way that a singer belts. Ah! It's the same thing. And so I think that the art form of musical theater really lends itself to this topic that so needs to be cried and screamed about.
Griffin?
I also think that, when we started really writing the show as a musical, because as I said, it was a benefit concert, and but as it kept going and people wanted to hear more and know more of the story, I think we felt that it was important to put a leading man, not just myself, but just the character of a leading man on stage who was black and gay and Christian and was not necessarily a caricature of himself. When I, as an actor, looked on television and film, I could not find myself on television. And, I live in LA, and a lot of times I would go in for auditions, and it was for either a drug dealer or the hairdresser, the sassy hairdresser. And I was like, there's nothing wrong with the sassy hairdresser. We know those people. And there's nothing wrong with the drug dealers because, well, we know those people.
That will be edited out of
But-
the videotape.
Edit that. But I felt like we needed to find another opportunity inside of the American theater where we could be complex and love ourselves, but also struggle with God. And I wanted for me to, as a writer, I wanted to create not just the complex character of Griffin, but also of all of the other characters that are inside of the show, Joy and Jacob, and people are so imperfect, and there's so many layers. And I just, as I was, I think, growing more and more frustrated inside of the theater, someone said to me, well, you can't just keep complaining. You have to change it. If you don't like it, change it. And so that was also part of the stumbling into the journey. It became a responsibility to dig and dig and dig and fight to create characters of the people that I knew.
Yeah.
I'm not really much of a theater person, but I must also say that I think theater plays a big role in sending out messages because people love entertainment. And I say this from the experience that in 2012 in Uganda, we had a musical production that had come up with a subject of discrimination in the health sector, but on the LGBTI people. And 30 minutes into the show, the police stormed and closed the production. But the theater takes about 300 people, which is the biggest theater in Uganda. But it was more than 300 people in that theater because the doors, the capacity was to the maximum. But that alone gave me a message. And if we look back into some of the musicians, people like Falakuti, Lucky Dube, these are people who used music to fight for freedom. So I totally understand when Griffin or Matthew says that if you cannot, the Americans don't cry. So to give that, they have to put it through production to send the message out, which to me I think is very, very important. And I think art and music does a lot in transforming society and using it as a tool to advocate for freedom. Yeah.
Do you want to mention talented Ugandan Kuchus as well?
Yeah. Actually, yeah, that group, the Talented Ugandan Kuchus, it's a group of Ugandan LGBT who formed themselves, and they are very talented. And actually, I thought that that production was going to be a success, and I was very eager to see it go on a world tour. But unfortunately, it was a project that came up once and closed. But I must say that some of the people who were in that production sought asylum, and they're in Paris. And they have formed a group of 8 talented Ugandan Kuchus, Paris.
Wow.
So I'm very eager, and hopefully one day you'll get to see and invite them and make another difference. Yeah.
We'll bring them in the spring. We're gonna. Now, I want to say that as an American who cries, and often cries out, and my last name is McCarthy, so I've been called un-American on many occasions, which I take to be an embodied moment of irony. But I cried this morning when you played music with the kids at Lowell High School. And there's a particular line in the song Invisible Thread, which we're going to hear in a minute, where it says, "I can't break free." And every single time I hear that line, I think about the multiple meanings of that, right? I can't break free because we live in a world where freedom for many of us is not possible yet, in different degrees, in different forms, in different places. And yet at the same time, the meaning of that song is about this invisible thread that connects us all as human beings. And that not being able to break free from that invisible thread is actually a form of liberation, is actually a way that we can be in touch with each other's humanity, even though all of these barriers and practices of prejudice exist. And every time I hear that song, from the minute I heard it in rehearsal in New York to the premiere of it to the 6 times I saw Witness Uganda last year, I cry. And so I want to show that Americans cry. And will you please play some music for us?
Sure,
Thank you.
There's a long invisible thread that wraps around my heart and wraps around your head. It tightens its grip when things go unsaid, and I can't break let go, let me, little boy, break free, leave him out on his own, let him find his way home. Can't take all this pain on his shoulders, only weighs you all down when you're older. Let him run, let him fly. If you love him, then don't cry tonight. Let him learn all he can, so when he comes home to me, he'll be a better man. There's a long invisible thread that wraps around my heart and wraps around your head. It tightens its grip when things go unsaid, and I can't break free. Lord above, can you hear my prayers? Hear my prayers. You know the answer that make me aware how to still love him, and how to still care, and how to stay strong when I wanna be over there. How can I love him and keep my eyes dry? Do I learn all I can, so when he comes home to me, I'll be a better man. There's a long invisible thread that wraps around my heart and wraps around your head. It tightens its grip when things go unsaid, and I can't break free. There's a long invisible thread that wraps around my heart and wraps around your head. It tightens its grip when things go unsaid, and I can't break free. No, I can't break free, and I can't break free. No, I can't break free.
Thank you. Should we keep going? God, thank you. This next song, it's so interesting. I think people find out that we work in Uganda. They find out that we run a nonprofit in Uganda, and they're always like, "Oh my God, are you guys building schools in Uganda? That is amazing." We live in LA, so that's how they talk in LA. But I'm always like, no, we're not building schools in Uganda. They have those buildings. Those buildings exist, but school is not free, so people can't afford to get educated. So no, we don't have a building to show for our work. Like we can't say, look at the buildings that we've resurrected in the village. We can't say that because that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to resurrect people.
We're
trying
to resurrect
people.
We're
trying
to resurrect
people. And that's a harder thing to prove than showing
bricks. Bricks. Bricks.
We always in the West assume like aid can only be tied to dollars.
Bricks.
Like you have to be giving people money and they have to be building something, whatever they're doing with money. And you have to be able to, count it and track it and 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 count it.
Hey, Jaco Yamba Ozukuke. Chino, Chimanyi, what you need? Bloga, Ekole, Fufu Yoka. Naye Omuntu Afanana Katonda.
Make me in the image of God. Forgive me for all I am not. Hold not our sins against us, but hold us up against our sin.
1, 2, 3,
Resurrect, 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 resurrect people.
Takuyamba ozukuke.
The highlight, the light.
Chino chimanyi bachiri.
The highlight, the light.
Bloga ekole bwa mufufuyoka.
The highlight, the light.
Naye umuntu afanana katonda.
The highlight, the light. Raise me, God. Raise me, God. Raise me, God. Raise me, God. Resurrect, 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 resurrect people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will say at this point that the initial inspiration for this series, the A.R.T. of Human Rights, came from watching, from witnessing the emergence and evolution and development and production of Witness Uganda. That I thought that this was, I think I said in one of the Act 3 talkbacks, that this was, for me, representative of a fully 21st century musical. That this was a musical that opened up lots of questions and that drew the audience in and forced us to cry out and do all sorts of things, but it didn't offer easy resolutions. That it asked us to participate in a conversation about what it meant to do aid work, what it meant to disclose part of your story but not other parts of your story, what it meant to navigate the complex terrain of race and sexuality and class and all sorts of things. And so one of the reasons why I wanted you two to be here for this opening is because it was your art that inspired this series about art and human rights. And so I want to ask you to reflect for a minute on something we talked about this morning, which was now that Witness Uganda has been staged and the issues around religion and sexuality and human rights in Uganda and all the way across the world are now on a global stage. People are talking about these things like they never have before. How do you now, as two artists who've created this art, navigate that world, moving from the stage to the theatrical stage to the world stage, particularly as it relates to your brothers and sisters in Uganda who you have a responsibility to? I know you've just been to Uganda. You were not sure that you were going to go back after the musical premiered, and yet you did. So talk a little bit about what it's like now after having done this, to go back into the world.
I think, well, we just came back from Uganda a week ago, so it's still fresh for us. I think that inside of creating a musical, we learned a lot about the business of creating a musical. It's not just all of a sudden we all land on stage. There's producers and designers and cast members, and everyone's got to get under the same vision. There's people that need to raise money, and so we had been, I think, in somewhat of a bubble, an isolated bubble, as we created the show. You kind of have to be. But we were in Uganda last week, and it took a lot for us to get there. We had to stay very low profile because of the bill and because the musical gave us quite a bit of visibility, so we had to be really careful. And one of the things that I said to Matt, as we were creating this show, it kept being hammered home, this is not a documentary musical and you cannot call it that, and people will think that it's true, it's all true, and it's based on truth, but it's not really true, and so, it's fictionalized, and We were standing in Uganda with our students who we hadn't seen in a year, and I turned to Matt and said, "It's all true. It's all true." And it was like a light went off in my head. Because I think that sometimes even inside of the work, you feel like we're artists and, you know, we're in our studio and we're creating. And we can think that it's all fiction. And when we were standing there after having traveled 36 hours across the world and having had a private hire bus pick the students up, they had no idea where they were going. We just told them to pack their bags. They were going to a private location. After them traveling some 9 hours to this private location outside of Kampala, I realized that it was true, and that the musical was not just a musical, but it was a responsibility that we had to get the story right. It had to be told correctly, because it was about our real lives. And even though parts of the story are fictionalized and parts of it, you know, have been compressed to tell a cohesive story, when you're standing in front of our group of 10 students, you know that it's real. You can see their real emotions about their lives. You can see their real emotions about their country. And so I think for us, the strength to go back comes from them, really. Comes from honoring them and them honoring us. And it's just this amazing collective community. And I said to my mom, when we said we had to send our mothers the itinerary, and Matt's mom wrote back in the email, so we sent her our itinerary for where we're going. Matt's mom writes back, "Are you crazy?" One line, and then send. What, are you crazy? We were a little crazy. But I think that, you know, I said to Matt also on the plane, this one of the women that travels with us to Uganda, who has been taking all the photos for years, and she's been very much a part of the mission, she reminded us of a quote, which is, "The safest place to be is in the center of God's will." The safest place to be is in the center of God's will. And so as, you know, the world is getting crazy, and I was like, look, if the plane crashes or someone tries to harm us, we all have to go, and if we have to go this way, then let's go, because we're on a mission towards love and honoring our community, because that, to me, is where God's will is for my life, and I wanted to remember that and hold that and meditate on that through the journey.
Yeah. I also think just on a very, practical level, as the show moves into the real world, it becomes more and more important to communicate clearly. And so last year when we went to Uganda, you know, before the production at A.R.T, we said to Diane Paulus, we were like, "Diane, we're going to Uganda. We're going to tell all the kids that we're gay. It's time for them to know, because they're going to read about it in the reviews." And she was like, same line as my mother, "What, are you crazy?" And she was like, "You could get killed. They could hurt you. They could hurt the students. You can't go and tell them. And P.S., we have a production in 3 months, and you can't die." And it wasn't. She wasn't. It was very serious, and it was concern for our lives. But a couple months before we went to Uganda last year, we had been approached by a friend of ours to be in this music video, this A.R.T music video, where we were going to be playing a gay couple. And so we went to Uganda last year, deciding we can't tell the kids, Diane's right, it's too dangerous. We get to Uganda on night number 1 in Uganda. One of the kids says to me, "Matt, I saw you in the A.R.T video. I didn't know you practiced that lifestyle." And I was like, "Oh my God, I'm so glad you know, but please don't share that with anybody else. It could be dangerous." He says, No, that is just for us. We must not tell anyone else, just you and me. Thank you. Second night in Uganda, another student comes up to me, "Matt, I saw you in the A.R.T video. I didn't know you practiced that lifestyle." I said, "Oh my God, I'm glad you know. Please don't tell it." No, I will not tell anyone else. Night number 3 in Uganda, one of the girls comes up to me, "Matt." I said, "What? Did you see me in the A.R.T video?" She says, "No." "But is Griffin your boyfriend?" And I was like, "Yes, he's my boyfriend." And she said, "Wow, what a catch." And he is a catch. He is. But it taught us last year that something that we've really come to believe, which is that politics is different than people. Politics is different than people, and what we hadn't taken into account was that we've built relationships with these students over the past 8 years at that point, and they are our family. And so they had a deeper understanding and a deeper ability to grasp that as human beings, we are more than just gay. And on this last trip, we had to have a very serious conversation with not all the students found out last year. So this year we sat down and we really had it out. We said, guys, we're gay. Witness Uganda is about Griffin being gay and getting kicked out of his church for it and going to Uganda. And we need you to know this because the fact of the matter is that as the show continues to develop, we are afraid that you could be put at risk. And so we need to make some decisions as a family now about what we're going to do. Are we going to take down our pictures from Facebook? Are we going to disassociate publicly? What are we going to do? And, and we brought them into the conversation. And they had to be a part of it. And, they said, we are worried because we could be targeted if something happens, so on and so forth. And so we said, look, you guys are all old enough now to make your decisions. You tell us what you want us to do. If you want us to disassociate, we will. If you want us to take down the pictures, we will. We talked about it. There were tears. And in the past week, several of them, by their own choice, have posted pictures of us and them on their Facebook accounts, knowing now the full risk of what that means for their lives. And I think that like us, like Griffin and I, we didn't know that we were going to become activists. We didn't know that. It was sort of thrust upon us, and we've accepted the mantle and gone. And what we said to them was, sometimes in life, because you met Griffin 9 years ago, not ever knowing that he would write a musical about gay people in Uganda, no idea, but because you know him and because of the way that our lives have gone, you now are also, in your own way, activists. And what you choose to do with that is your decision. If you want to speak out, if you want to be quiet, whatever it is, but you now know something, and now you have a responsibility to make a choice. And I think that as the show grows into not just a show, but life, that's the best that we can do. We have to just keep communicating and sharing and doing the best we can to take care of them and take care of ourselves.
That raises, I think, an important thread, not so invisible, here with all of your work, which is, while we can separate politics and people, and I appreciate what you're doing there. I understand the privileging of people as opposed to the politics that so often divide people is itself, I think, a worthy political and rhetorical project. But at the end of the day, the people's lives that are being represented and told and amplified, made more visible by these works of art and by the outspoken activism that all of you represent in different ways, is itself a political act. And so, Malika and Long Jones, your collaboration, what's brought you together is a different kind of story and a different kind of collaboration than the one that Matt and Griffin, I think, are describing. They're related, certainly, but the reality on the ground in Uganda is treacherous because of very dangerous political decisions and legal decisions that have been made that are doing immense harm to people like you and your friends. And your film, your attempt to document this, is in a way to make this visible to a world stage, to take these real lives and show them to the world. So how do you two navigate very different positions on that? You as a Ugandan whose story is wrapped up in these other stories, as a character and a subject in the film, you as a filmmaker going into a place that may have seemed not as home to you. How do you two navigate that collaboration vis-a-vis what you've just heard here?
Mm-hmm. Is it all right if I go first? Yes, so definitely when we made our first trip to Uganda, our first trip was just a 2-week research shoot. And David Kato, one of the activists in the film, and I guess just in case anyone here is not familiar with his story or the film or the situation in Uganda, so in late 2009, a member of the Ugandan parliament introduced this anti-homosexuality bill, which included a potential death penalty for any convicted homosexuals or aggravated homosexuals, and a ton of prison sentences for all form of apparent crimes, ranging from someone failing to turn in a relative for being homosexual or LGBT, or someone even touching someone with the intent of committing homosexuality. An absolutely insane bill. So that was introduced in late 2009, and that is generally understood to have been introduced partially under the influence of a small group of American evangelical missionaries who were out there and who had decided that their battle against the gay agenda reached into every developing country, and so they were trying to preempt any LGBT activism in those countries by introducing laws like this bill that they were proposing. And so this was almost exactly the same time as I'd first heard about Victor Mukasa, who I mentioned earlier, the transgender activist who'd sued the Ugandan Attorney General just a year earlier. And so as soon as this bill was introduced, it was like, okay, like we've just got to get to Uganda as soon as possible and start researching this. And David was one of the first people we contacted. We spoke to him on the phone. He's very informal, so he was just like, I mean, I could tell you, but you should just come here and then I'll tell you. So we just went there, and then we met up with him, and David, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but really he was one of the biggest advocates for connecting media and activism. And so he really sat down with us from our first day there and kind of really talked us through all the stories in the community that he felt were some of the most important to be told. And to be honest, that's how we connected with Long Jones, that's how we connected with Stosh, who experienced what's known as a curative rape. Stosh is identified both as trans and a lesbian, and suffered a kind of rape in order to turn her straight, supposedly. But so there were stories like that David kind of talked us through. But kind of to answer your question, one thing that was really kind of clear to us and to everyone involved was that given that this bill had just been introduced, it hadn't been passed yet, but it had just been introduced, and it was creating a whole conversation, or not a conversation, but a lot of kind of anger among the Ugandan population, because suddenly their pastors and their politicians were telling them that there was this evil gay agenda that was trying to recruit their children and rape their children and so on. And so life, of course, was very dangerous for the community. So that meant that from our point of view, we did not want to be at all involved in putting anyone in danger. And so what that meant was that we soon realized we could really only film with people who had already been outed or who had already outed themselves. And so that meant that the activist community was pretty much a combination of people who'd been outed already, either because they were found out for who they were and sacked from their jobs, or the newspapers were outing members of the community and publishing their names and photos and addresses. So there were a bunch of people who'd been outed like that, including Long Jones. And some people had just decided to out themselves and become activists. And so what we realized early on was that the film wasn't going to be a film about the LGBT community in Uganda. It was going to be about the activist community fighting this bill, mostly in Kampala. And that wasn't such a bad thing, because another thing we realized was that back in Europe and the US, the predominant focus of the news media, or the mainstream news media, was really on the persecution and the bill and the American evangelicals who'd supposedly inspired it. But what no one seemed to be paying attention to was the fact that there were these awesome activists who were actually strategizing on how to fight this bill. And they were strategizing on how to work with international advocates and activists, but they weren't relying on them. They had a plan. They'd already done a bunch of things, including suing the Ugandan Attorney General, and they were going to do that a bunch more. And so we realized early on, just meeting these guys, and also seeing the fun side of the community, how they celebrate each other and themselves, that we really needed to make a film not so much about the bill or about the persecution, but about this very unique activist community. So yeah, I'll let you speak now.
To me, I must say that I was hijacked. Because I was well dressed, going to celebrate a gay couple's 10th anniversary in a relationship, and David introduces me to the team, and they find me, they corner me in the kitchen, and they say, okay, here you go, say something.
I'm like half his height. I definitely did not.
So
You're half his height sitting down, right?
yeah, so it was quite interesting because it wasn't something that I was prepared for. But because at that time I was the MC of the event, I had to say something. And I thought perhaps that's the end of the story. And after that, the directors were like, we want to, everything that happened with the documentary is non-monetary. We are not receiving any money from the documentary. We signed agreements, there was no pay, no one expected. So you were doing it knowing that should you be at risk, it's up to you. Should anything happen, we are not paying anything. So that was the first thing that we all got aware of. And I was okay with it because to me, like I said earlier, I was partially doing my private business as a travel agent and activism as my other passion. So I went ahead and did that, and yes, I knew of the consequences, but it wasn't that doing the documentary was the issue that was going to put me on the forefront, because I had already been outed among the top 50 gay men in Kampala, and I was like, ooh. So I'm among so my visibility, I'm among the top 50. I felt like it was quite interesting because I never saw myself to that level, and I was like, okay, so since the whole city or everyone in the streets knows me, and people know who I am. And with time, of course, I gained confidence and I started coming out to my friends. But the political game of the bill, religion was the center of the whole thing, because religion introduced it. But along the way, because of the African politicians' greed of power, they decided to take it. And even among the religious, the very first anti-gay pastors, two of them kind of had a friction over it. And they actually split. So one is doing a drive that says, no, we don't want homosexuals to be killed, but we want the government to enforce Penal Code 145, which is a 1950s act in the books of law which criminalizes homosexuality. So he says, we don't need a new law, but we want the police to prove that the existing law can be effective. What was he meaning? He was trying to tell the people that the police is corrupt. So these gay people can be arrested and they can still get away with it. Then there was the other sector which had split and was saying, no, we are protecting the family. And to me, sometimes I ask myself when it comes to issues, why would someone leave America with $50,000, go down to Africa for 1 week to say they are preaching the gospel? In the 21st century, even if a Ugandan didn't go to school, but at least he knows God. It defeats logic, but that's what happens. Half of the flights to Uganda, a 300-seater Airbus takes 150 Americans mission to Uganda. I've seen this not just on a single journey, but each time I was in a flight, either from Europe or where, half of it I was like, oh my God, you know. But it's the politics trying to get away with the problems of the society and criminalizing a small group of people. I just estimate that perhaps homosexuals are 3% of Uganda's population of 38 million. So it just became a center for people to use the homosexuals to drive their agenda for popularity. If you want to be popular today in Uganda, just walk in and put up anything about homosexuals. You'll be popular. If you want to start a tabloid and you want to hit the streets, begin with homosexual stories. It will sell out. That is how bad it is. And of course, not being able to have laws that protect us, laws that are well streamlined to ensure that even if you want to persecute this group of people, but the ability to help is a right. And to me, I really want to say thank you to Tim for this evening, because the issue of humanism, humanity, humanness, human kindness, I mean, it is an issue that is taken from different levels. And the politicians do not look, they don't see this. They don't see that. And because of that, they did not realize the effect that they were bringing upon the country. They only looked at the issue of aid, but it was just a little bit beyond aid. What would happen, I've seen always when in America or the West, okay, basically, I will say, when a company does something that is not in line with human rights issues, people boycott. People boycott. Oh, we are not going to buy that. We will not take their services. But in Uganda, people are taken as trash. And I could say basically in Africa, humans are considered trash. The people in power are the ones who are humans.
It's time for a film clip. Thank you very much, Long Jones. We're going to play a clip from Call Me Kuchu. Do you want to describe, or are we going to do two?
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
go ahead.
we're actually going to start with the trailer for the film, which I think should kind of
Yeah.
help give people a sense of what the film's about and so on. I guess I've realized actually that one thing we haven't covered yet is just the fact that we were following David for about a year for the first year of our filming, but as some of you may know, David was actually murdered in his home in 2011. So in some ways, the film became about what the whole community did to cope after his death, and the many ways in which David inspired people to continue working as hard as he'd been working. So I just realized that I should probably give you a bit of context in case you weren't aware of that.
Great.
There is neither male nor female. There is neither slave nor free. There is neither LGBT nor straight. We are all one.
I'm the first gamer to be open in Uganda. The very first gamer. I opened my eyes and this is the real thing. We are not pretending. I wanted to begin the fight to liberate our people.
That's one reason I decided to come out, no matter what. I have 2 children. I am a lesbian.
In this country, to come out and say, yes, I'm gay, it's not easy.
95% of the population does not support homosexuality.
The anti-homosexuality bill proposes life imprisonment and death for aggravated homosexuality.
If this bill passes, they say within 24 hours, someone should report the person he knows to be gay. We are really going back into a amnesty regime.
This is the one that called for hang them here. I think Ugandans are interested in looking at pictures of homosexuals.
The neighbors were saying that I will be the next victim.
God's law is that homosexuality is sin, and the wages of sin is death. This man should be arrested, tried, sentenced, hanged.
sometimes I fear if they come and get me here when I'm alone.
It is one thing being outed, and another one being denied.
Uganda can't wipe out homosexuality. We found ourselves and we accept and rejoice in the way we are.
I cannot allow Ugandan children to be recruited into homosexuality.
The ones I've met are not with their a synonym of the queers here. K-U-C-H-U.
They kept on saying we're not here, but of late, we are here.
Yeah, so we have a couple of other short samples from the film. The first one is actually just pretty much what happens in the very first 10 minutes of the film or so. And it's basically an introduction to David, and I think should help get across some of the David that we knew, who was this public activist spokesperson, but also this awesome, funny, sometimes the dirtiest humor as well, but a really awesome, amazing guy. So we're going to start with clip number 1, I think, please.
Very nice for us here. It makes you become even sweeter. This one is almost ready. So here we grow everything. This is for the poor people. They call me the rich one on the village, as if I'm rich, without power. They don't have TV. Few of them know that I am what I am. Apart from that cousin of mine, he knows who I am. And that best friend of mine, he knows. But even this one doesn't know exactly. He's hungry. She's asked whether my dog is male or female. He's a transgender. Yes. When I left Uganda, that's 1992, I didn't understand what I wanted to know about my sexuality. I was confused. So when I go to South Africa, I'm staying at YMCA. I see these men on the street. I asked these ladies in the hotel, what are these men doing? They are selling gold, diamond. Others are selling themselves. I said, but I see men picking men. Here men buy other men. I said, for what? I said, and I've always wanted men, so I went the street. Interesting story you're going to hear. I get on the street now, and I paid so much money, of course, I didn't know the exchange rate. So when he said, you, it's like you're really gay. But me, I'm not. Me, I'm here looking for money. On Sunday, you shouldn't talk to me. I'm with my wife and children. We'll go to church. So he directed me to bars. Ooh, when I entered, all the eyes were on me. I was young, I was sailing, I was so nice. Not that I'm old now. Everyone wanted to come to me. But I feared what these men want from me. So a few minutes, the guy who directed me to the bar, he came and said, no, my brother, come. Meet David, my friend from Uganda. They all come to me. I go with the man. He has a big bed. You know, without poverty in Uganda, I've never seen such a bed. So I sleep like a kid this side. He said, no, don't come close to me. And I ran crazy. It was my first time. It's when I opened my eyes at 28. It's nice. So then I discovered they had bars for gay people, churches, gay Christian society, community. We had the church. Okay? People, they are singing in the chapel when they are handling, hand in hand. Oh, I liked it. It's when I opened my eyes and, is this the real thing? We're not pretending. So after 6 years, I come back here. I wanted to begin the fight to liberate our people.
So yeah, so that's an introduction to David. A lot of that story had to be cut out, sadly, because it was a little too extreme, but it was even funnier before we edited it down. But yeah, so we have one more clip to show you, and this is a clip with Long Jones in it, and it's actually one of my favorite experiences during the filming of this film, and even though there are a lot of tough moments that we all experienced during this time, this was just one of the most beautiful, and it's basically a drag show that Long Jones and his friends put on, and at Naomi's house, who's another activist in the film, and it was just wonderful, and so I thought that would be a fun thing to share with you. So that's clip number 2, please, and if it's possible to put the volume up a little, that'd be great. Thank you.
Oh my God, I have to first practice. Oh, I feel like I'm breaking. Oh, Jesus of Nazareth. Oh my God. Hello? Yes, my dear, I'm dressing, I'm getting ready for the show. Now we don't set a bed.
The master of ceremony.
Showtime. I would like to welcome you all. We wanted really to have something big, but because of security and other things, we decided to have it just like you see the numbers. So you should be wondering, are we the only people around? No, we are so many, you know that. We have a special DJ tonight, none other than Stosh. Our host tonight, this beautiful, wonderful place. Hopefully we are going away without paparazzis, none other than Naomi. So she deserves a big thank you. I'm your MC tonight, and I'll be taking you through the show with our contestants, and please encourage them. That is the order of the day. DJ. Contestant number 1, Veronica. Our winner tonight is none other than Engalo Veronica.
Gay rights activist, 46-year-old David Katochisule, was attacked at his home by unknown assailants. He was hit with a hammer on the head and died on the way to hospital. His death has attracted a lot of international scrutiny, with some media houses linking his death to his support for sexual minorities' rights and his campaign against the anti-homosexuality bill.
Long Jones, first of all, girl, you look good in those heels. Yeah.
Thank you.
I had to say that. But one of the things that strikes me about this film and what it represents is precisely what's represented there, which is this immense joy and happiness and love and beauty that is so moving. And it's the best in us and of us, right? When we can feel that. And yet, juxtaposed against that, all of that, is the hate, the violence, the prejudice. And you talked about the anger that you can scream out in the midst of musical theater. I get so fucking angry when I think about the hate that you mentioned before that's exported from here, the West, to your home, that connects us in a way that's both tragic and potentially liberating. You are now here in our home, which is now your home, because you can't be home. And you're seeking asylum here. So when you watch that, and when you feel all the things that we feel when we see that, how do you make sense of it?
I've learned to hold it, and I encourage myself, because one of the things I've noticed is the more I cry, it breaks me, but it does not help me to change the world. So the breaking down becomes a stumbling block to what I want to see. So I smile or laugh, but I hold a lot. This heart holds a lot. And that's how I encourage myself to move on. I must really say that having lived as a gay man in my country for over 20, 30 years, it is very hard looking at how trends of things changed from the time my early days of when I accepted myself, and how So how we did not, or how I didn't notice even the hate that had been sown into the public. Until when this happened is when I said, no, I think it's now very true. Until after David's death. Not just that, but a couple of trends went on, and one of the people who I would have considered mentored me or encouraged me, my director being arrested, the humiliation he went through, being forced for an HIV test against his will. His house was ransacked 3 times. I noticed that my security, my protection was not there anymore. And I started getting illusions, imaginations, sitting and doing my work, but my mind would trick a little bit, and I'm like, what happens if 2 people walk through that door and one of them points at me and says, that's the guy? Because it was, the arrests were totally unpredictable. You don't know who is chasing you. You don't know who is after you. And
Didn't that happen to you once on a border, on a bike, on a motorbike?
yeah. It's public transportation, the border, you are going to work and you really don't know that you're safe until, for the first time, it gets so close that someone almost hit me while I was screaming out homosexual. I jumped off, and then I think he thought I was going to attack him, and he ran away, but he was holding a log in his hand. So I quickly got back and told the guy, get me out of here. But I mean, a couple of incidences. But like I said, you ask yourself, how much money? Because that's what people think, that homosexuals have money, activists have money. When they hear you have a visa, they say, oh, millions. Yeah. So they know you have the money. But you ask yourself, how much money are you paid to ensure that you can stand all these storms and waves? You know, activism is just voluntary. People just live on, you know, handouts. Here is, they send you a ticket to go to a conference, the hotel is booked, and that's the end of it. But to me, because of my activism, I gained my confidence because I had established myself as a business person in Kampala who had his source of income, who did not rely only on activism. But still, because of the work I did, my business faced a lot of challenges. From nowhere, clients started avoiding coming back to do business with me. And in my mind, I knew what was going on. Even if we tried to, you know, get back to them, let's talk, and, you know, it was difficult to get them back, but I said, that will not pull me down, because what I have in me, I always believe it's a calling. Because I don't know what really triggers me, but I find myself moving on. My team and the audience here, I must say that each one of you has played a big role. And I'm talking this on behalf of my colleagues. Each one of you has played a big role. Those petitions that you signed, those mails you sent to your representatives, your Congress people, meant a lot. Meant a lot. And I just want to ask one gentleman just to wave to you, and that is Nathaniel Bloom. Nathaniel, please stand up. I didn't know him. He contacted me because he was following my postings. And he asked me, would you want to come to the US for a 2-week holiday? I told him, no. It went on for about a month, and the answer was no. And he told me, I have $700 that I could help add to your ticket. I told him no. When I consulted with my colleagues, they said, because I was like, I don't need to go to the US for a holiday. For what? There is work here. There is work here. And then my colleague advised me, why don't you make it a much more productive trip? Go, lobby, advocate, speak, tell the people. I shared it with him, and he said, okay, you're coming to speak to Boston. He got in touch with the Hispanic Black Gay Coalition and some other churches around. He put up a fundraising page to raise money for a ticket for me. I got in this country on 21st of February. In between, my flight was delayed. I was in Turkey for a night. I didn't have internet. He was worried more than even my own brothers, more than even my own, people. He was so worried. He was like, are you sure you will make it out? Are you sure you can fly out of Uganda? I told him, I will, as long as the bill is not yet signed. So I came to stay for 2 weeks for a speaking engagement around Boston. He picked me, he shipped a jacket. It was winter, he shipped a jacket to the director in New York. I got to New York, she picked me, put me on that bus, and I found myself in Boston. It was very cold.
It will be again.
Life is not easy. Life is a challenge. So I was going to nowhere. Somebody I never knew. He was risking to bring in somebody he never knew. But we both took risk of each other. When I got here, 3 days, the phone was a lot of messages popping up, 3 a.m. in the morning, still getting over the jet lag, the winter, and all this. So I quickly decided, because we shared a room with him. So I picked the phone, and the messages is that the president has signed the bill. It's now an act. I didn't sleep. And that's how my nights continued. Sleepless nights. No one in Kampala was answering to any of the questions I had in mind. I began to imagine what was really happening because I had been there. But along the days I started getting information of the situation of what was going on, and I was like, okay, we don't know what to do. So all this was happening, we are sharing information, I tell him what's happening, because it was like I was reporting to my boss. You know, I'm telling him, oh my God, this has happened. He got so much worried about my mental health. And he kept telling me, are you sure you're fine? You need to see a psychiatrist. I told him, no, I'm fine, I'll handle. You know. But at the end of it all, I didn't notice what was happening. Even it was until yesterday when I visited his house, because I'm getting support, so right now I'm staying. I stayed with him for 4 months. It was until yesterday when I went to his house, and one of his roommates, we discussed, and I'm like, I can't believe all this time when I was seated here, I didn't know that you were planning something. And his roommate was like, I don't take chances. The bill had been signed, and we were worried. We didn't know whether you were safe to go back or not. And they consulted attorneys for me. They didn't ask me. So the next thing, they came back and told me, oh, we have set an appointment. I think we should go with you either tomorrow or the other day to see lawyers. And I was like, okay. I'm now answering these things, but I'm not thinking. I'm just like, okay, but I don't know what is okay. And we went to the attorneys, and I have my attorney there, Alison, and the colleague from GLAD. So we met, and they were telling me things, but I would just cry, because I was like, asylum, you know. I couldn't imagine. I didn't want to think about it. And they were like, okay, you can, if you're not ready. I told them, no, I don't want. I don't think it's what I want. And we left. No one brought up the topic. But the information that I got receiving from home made me notice that there was no way I would get back to Uganda and still be safe. The pastor had gone on the radio station, had mentioned me, described even the car I was driving. When I got that information, I got shocked. My stomach rumbled. I just imagined one thing. How much hate do people carry in their hearts? How much hate? And that's the question I'll still have for the rest of my life. How much hate do people hold or can carry in their heart? And after all that, I took back myself to the attorneys. And they asked me, you're sure you want to do this? I said, yes, I'm ready to go. But I was still breaking down, because I never said goodbye to anyone. I never said goodbye. I knew I was coming for 2 weeks. And that's how I ended up here. And on 6th of May, we filed for my asylum. I gave it time because I thought things would get better and I would get my ticket back, and, you know, nothing looked positive. I filed my asylum, and I knew that it was now a journey, because as an asylum seeker, you will not work. you will not work as long as your case is pending. I have a daughter who will tell me, Daddy, I want tuition. I have my late brother's kids who will tell me, Uncle, we need fees. I have to worry about myself to make sure that I have transport to go to the attorneys, I have my phone on, or else everything gets blocked. So all this was something I was prepared for. The task was not easy, the one I was going into. But I accepted it. And that's why I say each one of you has played a big role. Not just saving me as me, but the fact that the Constitutional Court in Uganda repealed, the law was repealed and the Constitutional Court in Uganda quashed it, was a big deal. A big deal, not that you can have freedom as a gay person, but the major thing to me is that we can continue doing our work, which is the major thing. And as long as we can continue doing our work, the society, the people we live with who are among us will someday learn to appreciate. We will still be able to save the number of LGBT people who are dying of HIV. We will be able to reduce the risks. We will be able to lobby and advocate for inclusion into the government programs. We will be able to do anything. That's the only thing that this law has opened doors for. But it does not mean it's safe. It's not. People are still being hunted. People are still being displaced, chased from homes, from schools, losing jobs. It's there. But right now we look at what were the pros and what were the cons. Should we continue being very loud, or again the government will begin saying no? So when the progress and the dialogue goes on, we say let's discuss and continue this behind closed doors and avoid confrontation. Because when there is that open discussions, the African leaders think they want to impose neocolonialism. You know, it's a new system. So to let it be like it doesn't exist, but when actually a lot is going on. So currently, I have done my interviews for asylum, and I'm waiting for a decision. But still, I cannot work. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that with us. We're going to open it up now to the floor to have a bit of a discussion, invite you into the conversation with any of us, all of us. And we will have two folks who are going to run microphones. Is that correct? Okay, great. So if you could raise your hand, and we'll get you a microphone in the back there, Christian. And if you could just say who you are and try to deliver your question as a question and as succinctly as possible so we can get as much discussion as we can. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Susan, and I'm a student at the Harvard Law School. And well, I thought I had a lot of intellectual stuff to say about the context from Uganda, seeing as I'm from there. But after everything that Long Jones has put out, I just want to say that the work that you do is important to us in Uganda, as people who still live there, as people who don't plan on leaving. And mine is basically a vote of things. I don't think that for a lot of activists who work in Uganda, because most of our allies are out of the country, the people who have progressed in the movement and they're at a different level than we are in Uganda, and the people from whom we pick these perspectives and things that we can use in Uganda as a country. And so we don't have a lot of people in Uganda who are going to tell you this, but I think we truly appreciate the effort that all the activists put in, and not just because most times things look extremely hopeless. You know, if you go to the streets of Kampala right now and try to find an openly gay person, you'll find some, but things still seem extremely hopeless because it's not safe. But mine is basically a vote of thanks. To you, Long Jones, I think we've met a couple of times, I don't even think you recall, but to you and to everybody else, you know, Frank Mugisha, Pepe, Julian Onzima, all those people who on a daily, Kasha, you know, and other people who are not so much on the front line, but who do whatever it takes to support the people who are at the front. And, you know, it's just a vote of thanks. Thank you so much for your dedication. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
See you.
Okay.
Thank you so much for coming and speaking with us. My question for all of you.
What's your name?
My name is Christopher Healy. I'm a student at the Kennedy School.
Hello.
Yeah. My question for all four of you is about being insiders versus being outsiders. My understanding of the popular perception in Uganda about LGBT issues, at least among a lot of people, is that this is an issue that has been imposed upon Uganda by outsiders. It has a sort of colonialist flavor to it. And I'm interested, Long Jones, how you've dealt with that being an activist from the inside on an issue that many people in Uganda see as a Western imperialist kind of issue. And for the three other panelists, how you've dealt with being outsiders dealing with this issue internally, and how have you balanced within yourself how your art has balanced the fact that even though this is a global issue, and in America this is the time where we're really dealing with this issue, with the fact that in Uganda is in a very different place in that regard.
Shall we maybe move from the outside to the inside? You want to do that? Go ahead. Matt, Griffin, Malika.
What does it feel like to be an outsider looking on the inside? I think I'll speak for myself, that it's very sensitive. It's incredibly sensitive, and one of the lessons that I think we learned and talk about in Witness Uganda is about doing less talking and more listening, which is why in this trip we had to include the students in the conversation, and the rule for the Americans was we're going to open the conversation and then nobody talk and let the Ugandans work it out. And we sat there for 2 hours while the Ugandans worked it out, because I don't actually know where the issue started. I don't know if it was the evangelicals or who brought it. The fact is that it's there. And so I call it a Uganda issue. So to me, it doesn't matter who brought it. It matters that now we're talking about it as a group, and specifically for our students, that they're talking about it as a Ugandan issue. So it was fascinating to watch them work it out, to go from extreme fear to having other students say, I think it's great to be gay, I think you should be yourself. So the tide is shifting, and I think it's slowly shifting, but I also think that in order for it to do a true shift, it has to come from Ugandans. I can be a part of the conversation, I can, say what my opinion is, but they live there, they know it. And so for me as an outsider looking in, I think that there's a responsibility to be a part of the conversation, but to also let the conversation happen with them.
Yeah, sure. I think one thing that was really important to us in making the film was obviously to, I guess, kind of following on from what Griffin was saying, but obviously to make sure we could have as many conversations as possible with everyone we were filming with, to kind of see how as outsiders we could possibly document the most intimate story possible for each of them. And so that meant, kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, having conversations before we even turned on the camera about what might be useful to be capturing. And as I said, we kind of, we met with David and everyone about that, and to kind of understand what they felt would kind of help tell their story. And I think also kind of, as kind of smaller detail, but one that was really important to us also, was that in the film, even though we don't physically appear in it, there were little things that we kind of made sure to include, or we chose to include, to kind of acknowledge the fact that there are people behind the camera, and this isn't like some magical, magically filmed thing, but there is a relationship and an interaction going on there. So that was multiple things, from everything from like David glancing at us at the camera to people on the anti-gay side saying things in an interview like, well, you accept this in your country or something, but just kind of introducing key moments like that to just help remind the viewer that, there are people there who are making this film and who are editing the film, and that there's a relationship going on that has a whole host of issues related to it that doesn't negate the value of the story being told, but that's there nonetheless. And I think we did our best to be as aware of that as possible throughout. And then one great thing about the community is that they made sure we were aware of it all the time. And they're having worked so much with journalists, especially journalists from the West, coming in to like tell their story and so on, everyone in the community, or a lot of people in the community, were very, very cynical and skeptical towards us from the beginning. And that was really important, because that meant that we came in prepared, but then we had to be even more prepared, and we had conversations that weren't always easy, and they were very clear to us about what their feelings were. And I think one thing that was really important to us is there were some people who, when we started filming, said they didn't want to participate in the film, not because they necessarily disagreed with it, but just because they were done being filmed, who a year later, when we were still filming, were like, actually, no, we're ready to participate in this project, just because they saw what it was becoming. And then I guess one other thing that I think was kind of important to us and to the folks in the film was that it was actually screened as the opening event for the first Uganda Pride in Kampala. And from what I was told, that was because people in the community said that they felt it was an accurate representation of their experience and of an element of David's experience. And so I think that was kind of pretty much the biggest validation we could receive. But it's a large community, and it's not homogenous, so I'm sure there are a bunch of opinions, but from what people told us, that was what we heard. So.
To me, one thing is there's this thing, what I would say, stereotype, and the other thing that I would really say, ignorance. One of the major factors that has held so much the issue of persecution of gay people in Uganda is ignorance and just stereotype, where people believe what they are told and they do not do their own research. But still, at the end of it all, it's still a shaming that when they make references, they still use the Western research to those references. The fact that people can still deny the existence of homosexuality in the African culture is because they are ignorant of so many things, but particularly also they have not ventured into knowing more about homosexuality. One thing is, way back in the 18th century. One of Uganda's kings is perceived to have been practicing homosexuality. And because some of his royals refused to get involved with him sexually, he condemned them and they were set or burnt. And today, each year, Uganda celebrates 3rd of June as a Martyrs' Day. But they twist it. The twist is they refuse to denounce religion. But there are two facts to it. But they try to take more of the religious aspect to make it big. And it's, people come from all over the world. People travel, walk thousands of miles from Kenya, Tanzania, as a sign of, what's the word? As a sign of belief and commitment to religion, because these guys died for the sake of religion. But also another thing is, growing up, from my point of view, the first man I had sex with was an African boy. And I never saw any white man until perhaps I was 24. So, when people say homosexuality is a Western influence, homosexuality is imported, it is hard for me as a gay man who does not enjoy airplay or media attention to articulate my issue. Media gives good coverage to all the anti-gay groups, but little coverage, or perhaps none at all, is given to the pro-gay groups. Yeah. So, trying to make people understand or creating awareness is very much a hindrance. But also, the fact that in our local dialects we have meanings of homosexual is something you ask yourself. In my language, I have a word that means homosexual. And how do you say that is a Western culture when in my mother tongue I grew up knowing there's a word, or right from my forefathers, the ancestors, the word existed. So these are some of the challenges. Yeah. Some cultures perceived and welcomed homosexuals as a gift because of the uniqueness of their attraction towards same sex. And they were celebrated. So, ignorance actually is the whole major issue that is holding on to this and making people, or the whole of Africa, think it's a war between the West and Africa.
Mm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Susan?
Hi, my name is Susan, and I direct a nonprofit here in Boston, and I want to direct this to Griffin because we had a conversation after Witness Uganda. So I'm very different focus of the question. I just want to find out, since all of the increased heightened awareness after the show, has your philanthropy been easier, your fundraising, or is there still that critical need that you're finding to bring awareness to the Uganda project?
I think that it is my responsibility to say that there's always a critical need. we just came back from Uganda, and we now have 9 in university and 1 in high school. And when they handed me their budgets for this month, I pitched a good old fit because the numbers are real. And I think education is what he's talking about, and that requires a lot of money and time and effort, raising that money. And so it's been a challenge. But I will say that while we were at ART, we raised over $50,000 for our students' educations, which allowed us to continue the work for this year. And certainly, you know, there have been donations that have come through unsolicited. You know, I'll wake up in the morning and there's a donation for Uganda Project, which is genius. And as Matt and I have started to travel around and do our 2-man version of the show, several theater companies have put on benefits and made large contributions to keep the work going, because I so much believe in education, because I am aware of what he's talking about. It's why I can sit with our students this year and say, you're not allowed to be normal. Some of the kids were saying, you know, I heard that you were on Al Jazeera, but I didn't want to watch it. And I said, why didn't you watch it? You heard that we gave an interview on Al Jazeera, why didn't you watch it? Now you have access to education. So many Ugandans don't have access to education, but now you do. So you have to watch the interview. So you have to read the book. So you have to watch that movie. You gotta do it now, because you're no longer normal. And I watched our students, it lit a fire in them, because I think that for so long they felt normal, like we're Ugandans, we're normal, and I'm like, you guys, it's now time to take up the ranks and realize that you have been given an opportunity inside of this. Though it's difficult, there's an opportunity here, and that is to further your education. So yes, donations have come in, and we're so grateful for that. Theater companies have asked us to come and do benefits, but we continue. We continue.
Other question here?
Hi, my question is pretty much to any of you who has, since all of you have interacted with the questions of human rights, and especially gay and lesbian LGBTI rights within Uganda more especially. I'm Fatou and I'm from Senegal. And one thing that I want to note is how such a range it is in terms of experiences, right? Like I was personally, I watched today a documentary about these Kenyan filmmakers who also made a documentary about gay rights in Kenya. And I was just shocked that they were fearing that they can go back home and be killed, for instance. And I'm from Senegal. And people just lump it as the African experience, while it is very different. I think we have shows where people are gay and they don't fear, at least, to be killed for producing such shows. But so my question now is this. We cannot deny that throughout Africa, even if the range is different, right? There is a very distinct, hostility right now towards gay people and lesbian people and LGBT in general. So what can the young African people do, whether you're gay or not? Like, what do you do within your society actively as a citizen to help protect people who are citizens who are LGBTQ? And, how do we also fit in this fight, right? And I'm asking this because, and it goes exactly to what Long John's just talked about, that I think for me it's a generational thing. Most people we are hearing in our media are people who are the same age as my father and my mother. They are born right after independence. And that's actually the time, or them and the people born around that time, they had a lot of influence from Western Europe. In fact, in Senegal, we had the tirailleurs who were soldiers who lived in Europe during the World War I and II era. And that's the time when there was a huge resistance towards gays, right? And I mean, the Germany during Hitler is a perfect example. And so you have these influences that also are transferred generationally. So what I hear from my father and my mother might be very different from what my grandmother tells me. And exactly during my grandmother's time, they had a very different stance on gay rights and what they perceived as gays or lesbians, right? And so the question is now, we are in this new generation, we are about to take up most of these leadership and policy positions. And so the question is, how do we avoid some of that transmission, which is not exactly correct or helpful for us?
Right. Thank you very much. Anybody want to take that? Sure, go ahead.
I get fired up sometimes. Okay. Okay, it's unfortunate. The first thing will be, it's unfortunate that currently most of the young generation in Africa is all looking at the West. Everyone wants to leave the countries and go for greener pastures in the West, unfortunately. But of course, we still have to know that the majority will stay back. The time I have been here has made me go back on the drawing board to begin looking, as gay people, how do we get out of, how do we remove that shit that is between us and the other side of people, and try to work towards integrating ourselves? Because until we get out and stop saying we gay, we will continue building that boundary and we'll still have problems. One of the things is beginning youth projects, which is basically what I'm focusing on right now, but LGBT projects that are going to get integrated into the community, so that the community will put the task to the government and the politicians and say, while you were busy condemning or calling to kill the gays, we didn't have safe water. This water today is a project from a gay community. While you were doing this, we wanted good sanitation. The pit latrines we have today is a donation from a gay organization. Believe me or not, they'll get challenged. But also we must consider that until these youths are encouraged to continue education, because most of them are dropping out. Education is very expensive, very, very expensive. In my country, if you cannot raise money to take your kid to a private school, which is the high school, which is secondary, you know the system, which is it's high school. How, which year, which age? Yeah,
15,
you got
15?
15? Don't be surprised that a kid who has gone into a government school in this era at 15 years may not be even able to spell or write his names correctly. I'm not ashamed to say this, but the system in Africa is pathetic. Education, that is the major thing, to encourage the youth, because most youths are now being carried away when they see all these nice videos shot in the US. They want those pants. I got someone telling me, oh, I want this shoe. I told him that shoe costs $200. And he was like, what? I said, yes. So that is the kind of thing they are trapped in. That when they see all these musicians, the movies, they think that's what the world is. So education, to me, is the biggest thing. And having youth projects that can encourage them or sensitize them more about politics, but majorly sexual education. Africa people don't discuss sex. People don't want to open up to sexual discussion. Until it is introduced, and people begin to look that, oh, there is just something beyond when I see a man and a woman, there is that gray area which needs to be discussed, you know. And of course, still the emphasis goes back to education.
We have time for one more question. One more question.
My question is whether you think in the long run, the art that you're producing, documentary films and Witness Uganda, is going to ultimately have beneficial effects in Uganda. And when I say in the long run, I have in mind what is, to me, is sort of meteorically fast evolution of thinking in this country about particularly gay marriage.
And then the other person, other question.
My name's Charlie Munitz. I write for Boston Arts Diary. And it's a related question. I'm wondering whether there's been a reception to Witness Uganda and Call Me Kuchu in Uganda, and whether there have been thoughts about somehow producing these there, and if that is too dangerous, whether there is some way through the internet to make some scenes or some parts of these works available to Ugandans and to publicize the works that way.
Great. Okay. Matt?
First off, I think that if I didn't think that the work would somehow have impact there, then I wouldn't do it. So I don't think I have misconceptions about how long it might take for the work to have impact there in a large way. But at the same time, I also realize that in a very small way, the work has already allowed us to deepen our relationship with the people that we know there. And I believe, and I think Griffin believes also, that ultimately, along with education, one of the most profound ways that we can make a difference in the world is to actually foster relationships with people, to foster dialogue with people so that we can have a deeper understanding of one another. And as we begin to understand one another more, we begin to be able to respect one another's differences more. So it's a complicated question. I don't know that Witness Uganda is going to be the reason that gays will ultimately get their freedom in that country, but I do believe that it's part of the start of a conversation, and I believe that conversation and dialogue is part of it. In terms of will it ever be produced there, I hope so. At this point, we sing the songs with our students there. They know the songs. I think that I have to check in. I think that it would be a dream to be able to do it there at some point in all of its glory. But until that time, it's our goal as the show continues to develop to bring our students to the United States within the next year to see the next incarnation. So we're going to do the best we can.
Well, also just the impact of Witness Uganda, it's already doing it. Like I said, it's been about 2 years of Matt and I performing this concert, and it's paid, we've had to raise $50,000 each year. And so it's already having the impact, and I think that, like I said, it's part of education, as we all sort of have landed on. It's the key. So I do think that we're already seeing the impact of that Witness Uganda has had. This young woman sat on a panel with us, and as you can see, she is genius and brilliant. And one of the things that I remembered about you that night, we went home and talked about you, because I was like, I want Americans to realize that you are the new world. And I think sometimes we get into our heads that, you know, the Africans and the poor Africans, and it's just not that way. You are the epitome of education and poise and grace, and I love that you're here, and I love that you even came and graced us on the panel with your mind, and I love that that we all get to experience the Africa that I also know. And so I think that that's part of the impact of Witness Uganda, not just for you all, but for me too. I think I'm inside of this experience too, so I get taught every day from it.
Malaka.
Yeah, I guess like Matthew kind of hinted at, impact is tough to measure, but yes, well we've screened a number of times in Uganda in various contexts, mostly within activist environments or advocate environments. So, you know, known safe environments, especially because we didn't want to put anyone in danger. As I said before, the kind of the key screenings were at the first ever Uganda Pride as the opening event, and then at the second Uganda Pride. And, you know, I don't know, like, I don't have statistics or numbers, but from what I hear from the community, being able to watch the film and, you know, whether it's to kind of morally, gather morale from remembering what David was like and seeing how much the community has achieved in such a short amount of time. Again, we kind of focus on all the terrible things happening in Uganda, but they have won case after case there, and it's incredible what they've achieved. And in some ways, actually, again, we focus on Uganda in terms of this terrible story of persecution, but it's actually one of the shining lights of, as I think the person said earlier, it's one of the shining lights of LGBTI activism on the continent, and doing kind of, it has such an incredible level of organization within the community. And so we're excited that our film shows that, and I think for the community in Uganda, it kind of helps build morale and remind them of what David did. But we've also been working to screen it across the continent and actually all around the world for LGBTI communities and activist communities, many of whom are kind of looking at what was done on various levels. And what we show in the film, we show the community working on the international level with the UN, on a national level, on a regional level, on a grassroots level, as Long Jones was doing, on a health, education, all these things. And so what we're hoping the film is doing, and what it has been doing for the last 2 years, is generating conversations with people from all walks of life, but we're especially focused on generating those conversations within LGBTI activist communities so they can assess what they think they could be taking from what David and Long Jones and the rest of the community were doing in Uganda and what succeeded there. And that's been really exciting. So we've distributed the film kind of traditionally in the West, in that we've done theatrical releases in Europe, in the US, it's out on DVD and iTunes and all that. It's screened at more than 200 film festivals all over the world. But one thing that was really important to us, and kind of a responsibility that we had, I think, with the film, was that we couldn't just do that traditional stuff. We also had to make sure it actually got out to these LGBTI activist communities that could maybe most benefit from it. So we've partnered with the UN. They've got a new LGBTI communication campaign, and we've partnered with them to make the film available to screen at UN offices all around the world. We're partnering with Amnesty International to get it out as part of a new initiative they have to specifically for sub-Saharan LGBTI activists to get it out to across the continent. Again, we've actually done a whole host of partnerships that have resulted in screenings all over the place. All of that to say, all of that's really great and exciting, but it's so difficult to know what the impact is. But we're really hoping that these guys are inspiring people around the world. The other tough thing is it's essentially me organizing all of that, so we're sometimes a bit limited as to how much we can do. But you know, we definitely try.
Well, we're at the end now of a very wide-ranging and powerful evening with 4 remarkable activists and artists and advocates and human beings. And I just wanted to say thank you all for coming tonight, for being with us, and for being part of the launch of this A.R.T. of Human Rights series. On the back of your programs, there's a list and calendar of all the events that we have lined up for the fall. We'll be announcing a spring schedule sometime in November. I invite you to come to any and all of these events. I also want to call attention to the bottom part of the back cover of your programs, because this is a series that is trying to use the arts and the humanities to explore pressing human rights issues, but that's not enough. We have to take what these conversations inspire, the debates, the discussions, the further conversations, and do something about it. And there is a list of groups and organizations and websites and Facebook pages on the back here to hopefully guide you in what you do when you leave here, to make donations, to join Facebook groups, to be part of the ongoing coalition building and conversations and activism to create a connection between all of these different types of people and all of us, so that we can someday not have to come back to this stage or any other stage in this country or anywhere in the world and have a conversation about a world where human rights were enjoyed by everybody would look like. We can just sit here and celebrate the fact that we live in that world. And that is the vision that drives this series, the vision and inspiration that drives the work of these four brilliant, brave, and beautiful people. It's been an honor to share the stage with you tonight. Good night, folks.